Hello, friends. So happy to have you here with us today at Radical Joy. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time with us, well, we're glad you're here. Each Wednesday, we're here with you talking about things that weigh on our minds and hearts, hoping if you're dealing with something similar, we can adjust our perspectives as you listen. The more people we meet and the more places we go, the more we realize how important it is to make people aware of the fact that there is no shame in enjoying the parts of your life that are incredible. It's time for some radical joy, and this week, the three fingers pointing back at us are for our guest today, Tamar Nugent Gaynor. Tamar is a hospitality professional and mom of two living in central New Jersey. She is Jamaican by birth and Bostonian by circumstance. She is a lifelong lover of crafts and also dabbles in photography and graphic design. She's a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Incorporated, and an international historically black sorority founded 103 years ago on the campus of Howard University. Her dog Gryphon has a first, middle, and last name and is her favorite child.
Yes, he is.
Oh, welcome, Tamar. Oh, my goodness.
Hi, I'm so happy to be
Hey,
here with you today.
I am thrilled that you made the time to be with us today. Thank you for accepting our invitation. No, you raise an excellent point with that because it's just like we're
Mhm.
the last generation that cares because we want to build this bridge. I remember
Yeah,
having wonderful relationships with my grandparents on both sides of the family. And, these new generations coming up are just like, look, if you don't straighten up and fly right, it's one of those things where I don't have to make this relationship work. The things that
yeah,
you're saying are hateful and ugly and this, that, and the other thing. And I don't think the older generations see it that way necessarily. I think they see it as that's just the way they were raised. Understood. And we also need to pay homage to the fact that we're breaking generational curses. Our
hmm,
children and their children are breaking the generational curses. The only person around here that doesn't feel any responsibility to try to break any kind of curses are the people who were born before us. And I was
yeah,
like, okay, there is consequence to that.
yeah,
And though we may not be willing to give it, because I don't know about you, but boundaries weren't a thing. Like if my parents wanted to enter my room, all they did was twist the knob and just walk right in. Boundaries were not a thing.
no,
Respect was taught above everything. I'll never forget. My dad got so mad at me one time, and like corporal punishment was a thing growing up. It just was
hmm,
whenever I was growing up. And he told me, he said, "You may never love me, but you will damn sure respect me." And it was
hmm,
one of those things that if I couldn't earn it, it would be bought. And the payment for that was pretty steep. So it was just one of those things like, okay. And again, this is not a judgment on that. I'm just telling you what happened. This is an observation
yeah,
of what occurred. So it would never occur to me it takes a lot of overcoming to set a healthy boundary with people who came before me than it is for generations that came after me to do that on the way up.
yeah.
They
Agreed.
know they see it and they learn. It's like, oh, okay. All right. And, they're absolutely in for it. And my mother and I had a very specific conversation. I said, should I ever have children? I said, I have a very specific idea about the way that I want them to be raised. If they come home from Granny and Pappy's house with a word, I'm thinking a very specific word on their lips,
Mm,
I will know exactly where they have learned it. And there will be no more visits to Pappy's house until I get a blood oath that that will never be uttered in front of my offspring again.
yeah,
And there will be the fight because there will be the thing that like, well, I am the parent, so I am right. Everything I do is okay, and you just have to deal with it. And then there will be, I will buy everything that grandbaby wants to play with at Pappy's house because I don't have to listen to my kids' rules. I make my
yeah,
own rules. And then the
yeah,
struggle ensues. And then I will absolutely be the asshole that says you can't go to Pappy's house because Pappy and I have a disagreement on his vocabulary. And though
yeah,
you may not understand that at 3, 4, 5 years of age, he and I understand it. He may say he doesn't agree with it. I didn't ask if he agreed with it. I asked if he understood it. And that is the part where we set a boundary. This is
yeah,
the minimum of the respect that I expect from you as the grandparent of this child, not the parent. I'm the parent. I win. Period.
yeah.
And it's a struggle. How do you
Well,
do that without coming across?
there's two things. I think our parents and grandparents' view of respect was not actually the true definition of the word.
Amen.
I think respect was because it was reciprocal, because I give you food and I take care of your, your survival here on this planet. You have to do everything I say, which I think is manipulative. I don't think they saw it as that, but it is, because it's like, well, I'm 6 months old. I can't get
Right.
my own food. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a baby. I can't do this on my own. Um, so you holding that over my head is kind of unfair. But I think they definitely do not have that same idea of respect when we are asking for it.
Yeah.
There's no, hey, now I'm in charge. It's like they really don't want to let go of that. And you know what I have done, honestly, is I've kind of isolated myself from some parts of my family.
Yeah.
And not in an uproarious way, not I hate you guys, excuse me, I'm leaving, I'm never, it's just like, you know what? I live over here, you live over there. I love you. I pray for you every night. I will pop in and hug your neck and be around you, hopefully in good times and definitely in bad times. But the way that I am raising my children, and I am extremely intentional about the way I'm raising my children, it has been a conscious decision on my part to separate from certain ideologies and people, because I don't want my children to learn those things. I want my children to have more autonomy and more, space to think for themselves. I still believe, you know, I might have to do one of these sometimes every once in a while, right? And just, fix it back. I
Right.
still believe that sometimes you still have to parent. You have to keep your kids
Yes.
in check. It is your duty, it's your job. And sometimes they make it so that you have to, you know, you have to puff up your feathers a little bit and say, listen, at the end of the day, I am in charge. And
Yes.
that's not to say it diminishes what you think, but in this case, the zombies are chasing us. We are not about to argue about who's
Yes.
getting in the boat first. I
Thank
will
you.
throw you into the boat
Not a
so that we
discussion.
can escape
Yeah,
these You know what I'm saying? Like
I
I don't
do.
think kids understand. Like sometimes this is not the time where we are like discussing.
Right.
We need to escape the zombies right now. Once we make it across the river, we can chit chat about who carries the backpack.
Yes.
So I think the kids don't see it from that perspective. They think you're taking away my power. I had a suggestion. I think we should mow this, row the boat this way. And it's like, no, no, no. At the end of the day, I'm seeing things you aren't seeing. Let's go.
Yep.
I completely believe in that. And I love my parents for those times. And I can look back and see those times.
Yes.
But I think, I just definitely wanted my kids to have more of a autonomy over their lives. Growing up in a Caribbean household, I feel like there was a big emphasis on my being female
Yes.
and what that meant for what I should be doing, how I should be thinking. And it has never, ever, ever applied to me as a human being.
Right.
And so there have always been me being like, no, that doesn't work for me. Regardless of the consequence. And
Yeah.
so having a girl and then having a boy, I had a very specific ideas about how I don't want my son to think and how I do want my daughter to think, because this big, 40-year-old campaign of girls can do anything has happened, but no one has said anything to the boys.
Yeah.
No
Oh,
one has ever
okay.
said to the boys, hey boys, that means you got to change too. That means you got to do this.
Okay.
And so while I feel like there would be some empowerment to my daughter, as much as she could get without bruising egos, um, I don't feel like the change would happen with my son. And I want that change to happen with my son. And so that's why I've had to feel like I can't bring my kids around, because I don't want my daughter hearing certain things that makes her feel less than. And I
Yes.
don't want my son hearing certain things that makes him feel entitled to treat people a certain way because he's male. Um, and that's a big thing in my culture. And it's nobody's fault. It's the fault of, being colonized. It's the fault of so many horrible things that happened, that it's in our DNA, that has happened for generations, that made us fall into this way of thinking. But I don't want that for my kids. I don't want them to to treat each other that way. I don't want my son to treat women a certain way. I don't want my daughter to treat men a certain way or to feel like she needs to be treated a certain way.
Good.
And not even in a dating sense. Like I don't want her to
Sure.
feel like she needs to feed an uncle his food or give him a plate. Like, no, we don't do that in my house. No.
Good. Yeah.
We don't do that in my house. So, we don't uphold certain things just because. And I empower my children to think, why does this make sense for you? And sometimes that bites me and comes back to haunt me because I'm like, okay, I don't want you to use it on me.
I know, right? The zombies are coming. Settle
Yeah,
down. Let's get in the boat.
right.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, zombies are coming, get in the boat. And I'm like,
Right.
okay.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
you said that and it made such a wonderful amount of sense to me. It's like, yeah, because you teach your children and, to do these kinds of things, to be discerning, to have these moments of why and asking and scrutinizing almost everything so they can make their own choices. And then something happens where this is not the time for that. And that in itself is another lesson.
Yeah.
I am still the parent. I want to give you as much leniency, as much rope as I possibly can so you can make your entire life and web out of it. And then whenever something comes up that you haven't met yet, and I see the danger in this, and I'm going to do my damnedest to protect you from it. If that ruffles your feathers, if you get a little, some of your petals get bent because of whatever, I'm just going to have to take that because that is still more important to me to protect you from the potential disaster I know this to be. And then we'll talk about it after. Cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I promise you it had nothing to do with anything except me trying to protect you.
Yeah. And then, like I said, there's the times where my daughter's a teenager. She's almost 15. My son's 11.
Wow.
These are people with thoughts and like
Yes.
souls. Like these are actual souls. And so sometimes they're the ones who say, hey, listen, this is dangerous. I know you don't know. This is dangerous. We got to get in the boat. And I can't argue in that moment. In that moment, I got to be like, oh, I guess I'm getting in the boat.
Okay.
You see something fly? Let me get in the
Right.
boat.
Right. And
because I have to trust them, and there's
yes.
things in their life that I've never experienced, and things that they can be like, hey, mom, particularly with internet things that
Okay.
they're like, hey, listen, I've heard about this, or this happens in my school, and I'm like, what's a TikTok? And they're
Okay.
like,
right.
Mom, let me
Yes.
just get in the boat. I'll drive. I'll show you what's happening.
And
So you as a parent, sometimes you have to sit back and let them lead, and that's a weird, kooky feeling. But you
yeah.
have to, if you want to teach them how to do that, you have to, sometimes be under their tutelage, and you have to swallow your ego and able to do that. And what that does for them is beyond anything I can teach them. That gives them such a sense of empowerment and really sets them up for success. And if that means I got to swallow my ego and swallow my words and let them lead, you got to do it. Yeah.
Amazing. Because that's that. Because it's just one of those things where I think that parents, pardon me, or just older generations in general, have to make a choice between following the lead of someone who knows better, even if they're younger, or being quote unquote right, or the authority. And that's whenever you, like you're saying, you swallow your pride and you do the thing because you trust them as, like you're saying, fully developed souls. Like these at 15 and 11, these are people. They're younger, smaller people for the time being, but they are still fully formed people who, like you said, may actually have more experience in these certain situations than I. So I need to trust them. Get in the boat. We'll talk about it later when democracy is not the topic at hand. It's just like survival. So yes. And now that I said the word authority, I think what we talked about earlier, the ideas of respect are different. Whenever we see respect as a two-way street, some of our older generations may see respect versus the idea of authority. And I think that is a lot of times where we deal with something that's like, no, what I want is respect. I want this to be a reciprocal, a two-way street. I want to make sure that you see what I have to offer. And I will, of course, give respect to what you have to offer. We need to realize that we both have something to offer instead of someone being the authority, meaning anyone and everyone else in the room has to just do what they say blindly or there's going to be consequence. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's not what we're dealing with anymore. What we're dealing with now is in the notion of respect. I think that's a more modern idea of it. And I think that we've all got a lot more to benefit from that idea of respect than an authority versus someone who's subordinate.
Well, I think in this country, if we look at the history of this country, the respect has been manipulated. Um, and it's been manipulated because there are people who've had to convince themselves and others that they are somehow inherently superior. Um, and you have to convince other people of that. Once you convince them and give them that manipulation, you have to uphold it. And so you have to throw those things out like you have to respect me. And I'm not talking about just race. I mean, that's a whole different conversation. But even like
Right.
from man to wife, right?
Yes.
From men to women, it's this whole thing of like, hey, I'm inherently superior, not because I've developed a great personality, not because I've developed the skills to lead, but just because this one thing. And when you feel like you're given that, you don't really spend the time to develop your personality. You don't, and so even as parents, you feel like, well, I've been given this authority over you. I'm not going to spend the time to develop myself as a parent and develop myself as a listener, as a example. You just think, well, I already have this control and I have this power, so there's nothing else I have to do. And
Right.
then when you're charged, your child comes to you and charges you with, hey, listen, I need you to listen to me. I need you to, it's like, no, this is not, that strips away the lie that you are superior for some reason. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
makes you like, wait a minute, that wasn't true. Nobody wants to face that. So they're going to reject anything that kind of puts that mirror up to them that says, you're not actually, superior just because. That's kind of a lie. What makes you superior is being a better leader, being more ahead of me in learning these certain things. That's what the example I should follow, not just because you're my parent or you're my husband or you're the boss or you're this person. The idea of like inherent superiority, I think at the end of the day, is what trickles down into society, and people hang onto it for dear life because they don't really have anything else to offer. I think that's what
I
it is at the
agree.
end of the day, right?
Oh, I agree, because continuing education is so important for everyone. It's one of those things, well, if
Yeah.
you're born white, male, straight in this country, well, chances are, you just think that you got the keys to the kingdom. Whenever
Hmm.
there are a lot of people out there that were not necessarily born with that quote unquote skill set, not that it's even a skill, but they just continue to just kind of skate by on the fact that they have those adjectives by their
Hmm.
name. I'm like, but
Yeah.
we should also be exploring the fact that there are a lot of people out here that know a lot better because they have been working so much harder at all this. Because
Yeah.
if you're given the pass, like why bother? Why would I put myself through it? There's so much fun to be had in the world, and that's not fun. Like we said
Yeah.
earlier, it is uncomfortable. It's painful going through that growth. And it's some of the other things, it was religion that plays into it. We're talking
Mm.
about race, we'll talk about religion of
Yeah.
what a woman's place is in the home. And you were talking about marriage, love, honor, obey, so many of these things that are put into the vows,
Hmm.
the promises that you make in entering into this contract with another human being. And I know a lot of folks out there that are just like, love, honor, absolutely. That obey shit, absolutely not.
Strike.
That's a big
HTML.
old no, thank
Remember the
you.
strike?
And I'm all for it. I'm like, yes, obeying is for, it's for a different relationship. This is love, honor, respect, cherish, etc. There's also, there's one point where I've got to trust you to throw me in the boat when I'm being an idiot. There's another
Yeah.
time where I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to put you in the boat too, because I see something coming that maybe you don't, or you're focused on something
Hmm.
else. And I see something coming down the path that I need you to understand that is dangerous. And if I can't explain it to you good enough, I'm just going to have to grab you, and you're going to have to trust that I have your well-being so far ahead of your idea of respect that I promise you will pick up on this later, slap the snot out of me now, and understand I did it for a reason. I'll take it. That's my consequence for doing the thing that is outside our contract. That's outside our understanding of what this relationship is. And then I promise you, I will explain it to you the best of my ability once we're past this immediate danger. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there's this big, and I specifically brought up the man and woman and marriages. There's this big conversation with the podcast bros,
Oof,
and
yeah.
specifically in the Black community about submission,
Oh my God.
about women submitting. And I can't tell you how triggered I am by this conversation because of one, just who I am. So I'm Jamaican. Jamaica has the Guinness Book of World Record for most churches per capita of any country in the world.
Huh. Okay.
Okay. So religion is very, very, very deep and steeped into our community. Not only religion, but colonized religion. Religion that has just set these precedents that has generationally entwined in our DNA, and no one will stop and question it, because that's the thing with religion. You're not supposed to question it, right?
Okay.
Um, so this idea of submission and how women are supposed to act towards men, there's all these conversations. And as a mother of a girl and a boy, I'm so triggered by this conversation, because I'm trying to hold this line where, like I said, everyone's been pouring into their girls, right? The past 40, you can do anything. You don't have to, you can be a rocket scientist. But who is talking to the boys? Who is telling the boys it's okay to wash dishes? It's
Ooh.
okay to be the one to stay home with your kids. Like there's this idea that anything that is feminine or considered feminine or female is an insult to men. Like men will literally use being a woman as an insult to other men.
Yes,
And
they
I
will.
think about this, and I think about who my son is around, and all the women that I know who have raised beautiful, wonderful, strong, amazing women, and who have raised these kind of failure to launch sons, because nobody was paying attention. No one was having those conversations. Everyone's saying to the girl, go STEM, go be a doctor, go climb Mount Everest. But no one was saying to the boys, your masculinity is never on trial. Whatever you are is masculine, because you are a man. Whatever you are, you're a ballerina, that's under the gamut of masculinity, because you are a man. And I think that's where I'm struggling to just really be like on point with when it comes to my son, because there's so many different little things that comes with being a Black man. And I need my son to navigate this, but I need him to shed the things that he might take in that's going to hurt another Black woman. And
Agree.
that's an onus that shouldn't be on an 11-year-old boy,
Yes.
but it is. It
Agree.
is. And it's something that like I need to have that conversation with someone. Think of these conversations of submission, and all these men are like, you have to submit. It's the order of things. It's the way God intended it. This is how it's supposed to be. And I'm thinking here, like, I can think of another group of people who said, this is how it's supposed to be.
Okay.
You're supposed to submit to me. So as Black people, when I see Black people doing this, I'm like,
Excuse me.
the irony here of like, who else tried to feed us that, and now you're trying to feed it to, our women. And so I just need to have those conversations with my kids, and I bring everything back to my kids, because I feel like that is literally, I know how corny and cliche that sounds, but like I take my responsibility to them so seriously, and I tell them all the time, my job is to give you a good life, and to raise you for your life.
Yes.
Beyond mine, for the rest of your life. Like even when I'm dead and gone, I'm responsible for the person that you are until you die. And so these conversations of like male and female, every time the first thing I think about is my kids. Like, how do they interact with each other? How is that going to affect who they are as people, and who my son is as a man, and who my daughter is as a woman? And it's very tricky, and it's I don't think a lot of parents even think about it, but I do. And I am on top of it, because I can't imagine empowering my son to make a woman feel like he is inherently better than she is. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine my son doing that, because just who he is, he's such a sweet person and kid. And I want to hang on to that. I don't want him to get into this idea of like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be, because people say that. I don't want him to have this idea of like, these are the things I can't do because they're less than me. Because again, Marley's good. My daughter's good. She's being empowered left and right. Everyone's telling her, go be a sumo wrestler, go do whatever you want.
Right.
But I wanna have that same conversation with my son of like, hey, do whatever you want. There's no you can't. I don't want you to shut off half of your humanity because you think it's not for you. You can't. It's too feminine for you, and it's
Yes.
not. It's just humanity. You
Thank you.
know, this
Well, it's all.
podcast. This guy. Oh, sorry. One last
No,
note. This
tell me,
guy was
please.
was so upset on a podcast that a woman brought him flowers, and he was like, "I'm a man. How dare you?" And I was thinking to myself, like, how do you get to the point on this earth, being a human being, that flowers,
Yeah.
beautiful, colorful, gorgeous flowers offend
Thank
you?
you.
And I was like, I do not want that for my kids. I don't.
It's so
You're a
limiting.
human being. What human can look at a flower and be like, no,
Yeah.
come on?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think about that stuff a lot.
Good. I think most of us need to be thinking about that. I think that's something that we really need to focus on. You bring up so many wonderful points. I hope I can like hit them all with the things that I wanted to say to sort of like go along with. Number one, it's so easy for us to empower our women because for so long we expected so little. We expected them to be this, and this, and they just did it because there was no other way around it. I mean, they were the quote unquote weaker sex. We had legislation in place. We had expectations that were not only cultural, they were religious, and they were also basically legislative. Like women didn't even get to have their own credit cards until the 70s. They had no way out. Literally, the only way they could do it was by falling in line. One. Number two, if your masculinity, quote unquote, is so unbelievably delicate that someone bringing you a gift of lovely flowers is something enough to like throw you into a spin, I was like, I pray that you find a way to get better than that. That just breaks my heart for them because a gesture of kindness can be so unbelievably sparse. Like we don't get a lot of those sometimes in this day and age. It's just not something people think about as often. So I'm just like, hey, a kindness is something we should appreciate regardless.
Yeah.
Number three, the thing that I was just, this was the one that I really wanted to, and it's barely just slipped outside of my scope. It was one of those things like it never fails that whenever we talk about being better people, that it always came back to your children every time we were talking about it, because I knew you when your babies were still in the womb. Like it was one of those things like I have known of them. I've never met them in person, but I know so much about them and know that you are always just so specifically cognizant about how you behave in front of them, not only as children, not only as male and female, but also as Black children that will eventually grow into Black people. And these were the kind of conversations that made me a more aware human being of exactly what was going on. The story that you told me about getting pulled over in the Audi so many times just because you were a Black woman driving an Audi. I was like, I have heard about this, but I never knew anyone that this actually specifically happened to.
Yep.
And it's just amazing to me. Now I know what it was. The thing that you do with your son, the things that are so great, the fact that he can do and be anything, that your daughter can do and be anything. It's so difficult because you are not only working against history, you're working against society and culture and community. Because like you're saying, you've got these podcast guys, these alpha bro whatevers that are saying out there what it is that he needs to be if he wants to be a man in this day and age. Couldn't be farther from the truth, because as we continue to move and progress as a society, it's like, hey, do what you want to do. You know what makes a good man? Being a good person, raising your children, taking care of the people you made promises to take care of, having, being a progressive member of society so that you contribute not only to your immediate community, but also those coming behind you and those who have led before. There's a million things that you have absolutely nothing to do with your gender or your role as ascribed by society. Okay, great. So what does that look like? Well, listen to your mama. Yes. And there are 14 other people out there that are trying to tell him that his woman needs to submit, or he needs to do this, or he needs to do that. Otherwise, he's some kind of like terrible named cuck or this, that, and the other. And then let's not even start about the fact that women in his life may call him or throw things at him that will call him quote unquote feminine things, not realizing that that is their own ingrained self-hatred that this society's tried to put in them. Now they're trying to force on him. Oh my God, 74 different layers of this thing. How in the world are they
Yeah.
supposed to navigate this?
Well, it goes back full circle to what Marley said in the beginning. She said, "You teaching me how to be a good person is isolating me from my peers." And that's one of the things, like the way that I'm teaching them, the way that I'm showing them is absolutely different than what their peers are learning and what society is telling them. And I just hope I'm arming them, you know,
Yeah.
right. At the end of the day, maybe it is a little selfish. I just want to be proud that I put forth two good, decent souls onto the earth. That's what I want my personal legacy to be. When someone stands at my gravestone, I want them, it's less about my life. I hope I had a good life and I was a good person, but I want them to say, hey, the two souls she got put in charge of turned out to be really good people, and kind of perpetuated that same thing generationally. That's really all I think about every step of my life. That's it. Just is so it's that important to me. And I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, I prayed for y'all.
Yeah.
I prayed for y'all. I begged God for y'all. You know, women have all kinds of issues with reproduction and fertility and things like that. And I was among those women, and I begged the universe, God, whatever you want to call him, her, she, whatever. Um, I begged for them. I begged to be in charge of these souls. And so I was granted that wish, and I just take it super seriously. But you can't do it without looking at the entire world and taking in
Yes.
so much overwhelming information and trying to funnel it in a way. And at the end of the day, it also just stems from like who they are. Who were they? What souls got put into that body? Because some of that I have no control over.
Okay.
You know, some of it really is nurture. You just have a certain kind of personality. But I still take responsibility for it, and I take responsibility for them. So like when I think about all these conversations we have on what kind of person I want to be, what society's doing, the harm in the world, I just always think back to them, because I'm like, how am I gonna show them? How am I gonna make sure that they come out as good people? Um, and that's that's where my radical joy comes from. Just making sure they're good people and that they're good. That's I can't explain. I know it sounds so stupid. I hate when people say it. It sounds so kind of like cliche, but that's really, they are the stem of my joy, really, really and truly. And so when I think of all the things in the world, it's always back to them and how I'm going to help navigate their lives so that they can just be comfortable, but also always look around them and try to make others comfortable. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, and that's the thing too. If I may, if I can just be so absolutely presumptive, I would like to just go ahead and say presumptuous. You are a good human. That's part of the reason why I wanted you on here so badly. I love being around you. Being in your presence makes me feel better about what I'm doing. It makes me think more deeply about the
Aw.
person I was and the person I want to be. And the fact that almost every conversation we have ever had since you had children always goes back to exactly what you've been sharing with us today.
Mhm.
It never feels cliche. It's one of those things where you can feel it, even though in an age of social media where everybody is so carefully curated and manicured and they present only what they want everyone else to see. That has always been your operating system. That's always
Mhm.
been exactly who you were and why you walk the way that you walk. So I was like, great. Let me tell you, I can put that curiosity to rest right now. And number two, even though I've never met your children, the things that I get to see and their accomplishments and this, that, and the other, and your single-mindedness in making them amazing people and contributing members of society, even if it does isolate them from their peers, I appreciate it. I really am so grateful that there are parents like you in the world that have that at the forefront of what they do as parents and who they are as people, and the mentors of becoming people.
Mhm.
It's so wonderful to see. So thank you for being the person you are and for making the people you're making.
Thank you. That's good to hear, because sometimes I just feel like, "Oh my god, what if they turn out to be like bank robbers and then none of this none of
and
this works?"
and there's part of me that's just like, no, because we've all heard people say that too. It's like, well, it ain't because their mama wasn't a wonderful person because she tried. And
But they will be the best bank robbers they could be, I tell you that.
and that's what we got to say about it. Tamar, thank you so much for being with us here today at Radical Joy. It has been a pleasure. And it's been everything that I knew it was going to be. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. If you're
My pleasure.
If you're turning in right now, this is your first episode with Radical Joy. We just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in on an episode where one of my absolute favorite people got to be with us here today. It's always such an honor to have a guest, but whenever someone who's been with me and part of my life for as long as Tamar has, and someone whom I respect and admire as much as I do her, I'm happy you got to be here to be a part of this conversation. If this is not your first episode with Radical Joy, welcome back. We are so happy that what you heard in previous episodes was enough to ask you to come back and enough to draw you back to our conversation. And that's what this is. I'm hoping this has been a conversation that, even though you weren't in the studio with us, that something that we said sparked something in you that was so irresistibly responsive that you had to say something back to your listening device, your phone, your dashboard, whatever it was. That's the kind of thing we're here to do at Radical Joy. If you are a review type person, we ask that you go ahead to whatever listening platform you're listening and leave us a 5-star review. Take a picture of it, send it to us here at Radical Joy. We would love to send you some swag. I'll send you a sticker with my face on it, enjoying a cup of coffee. We're doing everything we can to make sure that we talk about the important parts, we talk about the difficult parts, so that whenever we broach these topics, that maybe if you're dealing with something similar, you can broach that a little bit easier with whoever you need to have that conversation with. As always, we're so grateful that you're here, so proud to be a part of the conversation, and of course, we love y'all. The bottom line is, use your words, friends. Thank you for joining us again in this moment of Radical Joy. If this is your first time, we're so happy you're here. Take a moment to check out our archive, see if there's something else that fires you up, rekindles the joy in you, and hey, spread the word if you enjoyed it. We welcome reviews and messages. Let me know what you want to talk about. I rarely run out of things to say. So if there's something on your mind or heart, I want to hear from you. Don't forget, there is no shame in joy. I am not a therapist or a medical professional. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency, please call 911. This content and other content produced by CLW Studios and affiliated partners is not therapy, and nothing in this content indicates a therapeutic relationship. Any opinions of guests on this podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of James or CLW Studios. Please consult with your therapist or seek one in your area if you're experiencing mental health symptoms. Anything in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Learn more about James and CLW Studios. Follow the link in the show notes. Don't forget to leave a review, and hey, we'll send you a sticker. Just send a screenshot and let us know where you want it sent. Have a great week, and we will see you next Wednesday for another dose of Radical Joy. Love y'all.